I like that you're calm, that you think first and you act second. I need that in my life.
Yeah, so walk away, Grandpa.
You know what?
Nobody! Call him Grandpa!
I do.
Did you know one show on this list replaced their main star and pretended nothing happened? Another one kept going for 9 years after the main love story was resolved. These producers did not care about the story. They only cared about the cash. We are breaking down the exact episodes where these legends fell apart and revealing the behind-the-scenes chaos that caused the downfall. 1. The Simpsons.
Oh, I have 3 kids and no money. Why can't I have no kids and 3 money?
If you grew up any time in the last 30 years, you know The Simpsons. It is the Yellow family that changed television forever. For the first 8 or 9 seasons, it was untouchable. The writing was sharp, the jokes were smart, and it had a ton of heart. Critics call this the golden era. But then, something shifted. We are now in season 30-something, and let's be honest, it is not the same show. The thing nobody tells you is that fans can actually pinpoint the exact moment the show broke. It is often called the Principal Skinner Imposter episode. In that episode, we find out that the Principal Skinner we had known for years was actually a fake. It felt like a slap in the face to the audience. It told us that the history of the characters did not matter anymore. From there, the plots just got wackier. Homer went from a lovable but dumb dad to a jerk who could survive any injury. He stopped feeling like a real person and became a cartoon character in the bad sense. What many overlooked is the sheer volume of episodes. With over 700 episodes, it is statistically impossible to keep them all good. The voice actors sound older now, and the animation, while cleaner, lacks the gritty charm of the 90s. The show used to set the trends, but now it feels like it is just chasing them. They bring in celebrity guest stars just for the sake of it, not because it makes the story better. It is like watching a once great athlete refuse to retire, stumbling around the field while everyone remembers how good they used to be. But if you think an animated family overstayed their welcome, wait until you hear about the group of friends who spent almost a decade telling a single story. 2. How I Met Your Mother.
Because time will heal a broken heart, but not that bitch's window.
The premise of How I Met Your Mother was simple and brilliant. A dad in the future tells his kids the story of how he met their mom. It was a mystery wrapped in a sitcom. We had Ted, the romantic, and his friends Marshall, Lily, Barney, and Robin. For the first few seasons, it was fresh and exciting. We were looking for clues in every episode, trying to guess who the mother was. But then the seasons kept coming. You see, the problem was that the show became a victim of its own success. They had to stretch the mystery out for 9 long years. That meant Ted had to date almost every woman in New York City. It got frustrating. Every time he met a nice girl, we knew it would not work out because the show was not over yet. By the time we got to season 9, the writers were really scraping the bottom of the barrel. To put it mildly, the final season was a mess. They decided to set the entire 20-odd episode season over the course of a single weekend. Barney and Robin's wedding. It felt dragged out and claustrophobic. And then came the finale. After 9 years of build-up, we finally meet the mother, a lovely character named Tracy. And what happens? The show quickly reveals she passes away so that Ted can go back to dating Robin. Fans were furious. It felt like the show had lied to them for a decade. If they had ended it 3 or 4 years earlier, it would have been a perfect story. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about stretching a mystery too thin. But speaking of stretching things out, our next office workplace comedy lost its boss and then lost its way. 3. The Office, U.S.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
KGB.
KG?
We will ask the questions.
What the hell was that?
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Hey, hey!
The Office is one of the most streamed shows in the world for a reason. It is comforting, funny, and has amazing characters. Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell, is one of the best comedy characters ever created. The show was perfect for about 7 seasons. It had the romance of Jim and Pam, the pranks, and the cringy leadership of Michael. But then Steve Carell decided to leave the show. Most people would agree that when your main character leaves, it is probably time to pack up the cameras. But NBC wanted to keep the show going. So for 2 more seasons, we watched the staff of Dunder Mifflin struggle without their leader. They tried to replace Michael with Will Ferrell, then James Spader, and even a British lady named Nellie. None of it really clicked. The energy was off. What many overlooked is that the characters started to change too. Andy Bernard, who had a great character arc where he became a nicer guy, was suddenly turned into a villain again in the final season. It felt random and mean. Jim and Pam, who were the perfect couple, were given a weird marriage drama storyline involving a boom mic operator that nobody liked. It felt like drama just for the sake of drama. While the very last episode was sweet and gave us some closure, the road to get there was bumpy and unnecessary. It proved that sometimes the boss really is the heart of the company. But from a paper company in Scranton, we moved to a coffee shop in New York where 6 friends just did not know when to say goodbye. 4. Friends.
All right, what are we having?
Friends is a global phenomenon. Even today, you can turn on the TV and find an episode playing. It defined the 90s. You had Rachel, Ross, Monica, Chandler, Joey, and Phoebe. Their chemistry was electric, but even the biggest fans admit that the later seasons started to feel a bit repetitive. By the time season 8, 9, and 10 rolled around, the characters had largely achieved their goals, but the show had to keep inventing problems to keep them apart. You see, the actors were making $1 million per episode. With that kind of money on the table, nobody wanted to cancel the show. But the storylines suffered. We got the strange plot where Joey and Rachel fell in love. It felt totally wrong to the audience, because they had always been like brother and sister. It seemed like the writers were just throwing names in a hat to see who should date next. Also, the characters became extreme versions of themselves. Monica became impossibly loud and obsessive. Joey became so dumb it was hard to believe he could survive on his own. Ross became more of a screaming maniac than a paleontology professor. While the finale was watched by millions and wrapped things up nicely, the journey through those final years felt like a victory lap that went on for too many miles. It was still funny, but the magic spark had faded a little bit. But if you think Friends dragged on, our next show literally invented the term for when a show goes bad. 5. Happy Days.
Go over these steps and I want you to touch each step.
Happy Days was the king of television in the 1970s. It was a nostalgic look back at the 1950s, centering on the Cunningham family and the cool biker, Fonzie. Fonzie became a cultural icon. He could start a jukebox just by hitting it. But as the seasons went on, the writers started to run out of realistic stories for a bunch of kids in Milwaukee. This leads us to the moment that changed TV history. In season 5, the cast went to Hollywood. In one episode, Fonzie, wearing his leather jacket and swim trunks, literally jumps over a shark on water skis. It was so ridiculous and unbelievable that people started using the phrase "jumping the shark" to describe the moment a show stops being good and starts being a gimmick. But believe it or not, the show went on for 6 more years after that. Ron Howard, who played the main character Richie, left the show to become a director, so the writers had to scramble. They brought in new characters like Chachi and Roger that nobody cared about as much. Fonzie became less of a cool rebel and more of a magical superhero who could solve any problem. By the end, the show had lost all of its 50s charm and just felt like a tired sitcom trying to survive the 80s. It is a classic example of not knowing when to fold them. And speaking of 80s families, our next show started as a gritty reality check, but ended in a bizarre fantasy. 6. Roseanne.
This is the winning lottery ticket! I've got it right here! Remember you told me to watch it on TV! What are you talking about? We won the lottery! I can't believe it!
The original run of Roseanne was groundbreaking. It showed a blue-collar family struggling to pay bills, dealing with unemployment, and fighting with each other. It felt real. Roseanne and Dan Connor were the parents we all recognized. They were not perfect, but they loved their kids. For 8 seasons, it was a masterpiece of working-class comedy. Then came season 9. To put it mildly, it was a fever dream. The Connors win the lottery. Suddenly, the family that struggled to buy cornflakes is rich beyond their wildest dreams. They move into a mansion. They hobnob with royalty. Dan cheats on Roseanne. It was like watching a completely different show. Fans hated it. It betrayed everything that made the show special. But here is the twist that makes it even worse. In the final episode, it is revealed that the entire 9th season was just a story Roseanne was writing in her book. None of it happened. And the most heartbreaking detail? In reality, Dan had passed away from a heart attack at the wedding in the previous season. It was a dark, depressing end to a comedy. The revival years later tried to fix this by ignoring season 9 entirely, but the damage was done. It is proof that money changes everything, even TV shows. But sometimes it is not money that ruins a show, but a change of location, like moving from a hospital to a classroom. 7. Scrubs.
Ow! He's the one that needs to cry, you idiot, not me! Ow!
Scrubs was a fantastic mix of goofy comedy and serious medical drama. We followed J.D. and his best friend Turk as they went from scared interns to confident doctors. The show had a perfect ending in season 8. J.D. walks out of the hospital, seeing visions of his future. It was emotional, beautiful, and the perfect way to say goodbye. Fans were crying happy tears. But ABC wanted more, so they brought the show back for a season 9. But instead of being about J.D. and the old gang, it was set in a medical school. New students were the main characters. J.D. was only there as a teacher for a few episodes. The old hospital was gone, replaced by a classroom set. It felt cheap and unnecessary. What many overlooked is that this was supposed to be a spin-off, but the network insisted on keeping the name Scrubs to get more viewers. It backfired. Fans did not care about the new students. They missed the chemistry of the original cast. The narration changed, the vibe changed, and it just felt like a zombie version of the show we loved. It was canceled after that one season, but it remains a stain on the legacy of a great series. If they had just stopped at season 8, it would be remembered as perfect. But speaking of families that grew too big, our next show dealt with kids growing up in real time. 8. Modern Family.
Yes!
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm going to kill you!
When Modern Family premiered, it was a breath of fresh air. It was shot like a documentary with characters talking to the camera. It followed 3 different branches of the same family. It was funny, fast, and clever. We watched the kids, Luke, Manny, Haley, and Alex, grow up on screen. But that was also the problem. You see, cute kid logic does not work when the kids are 25 years old. As the child actors grew into adults, the writers struggled to find things for them to do. Haley went from a popular party girl to a confused adult living in her parents' basement with twins. Manny went from a precocious kid to a pretentious snob who was hard to like. The storyline started to loop. Phil and Claire would have a misunderstanding, hide it from each other, and then make up. Cam and Mitchell would bicker about something small. By season 10 and 11, the show felt tired. The jokes were predictable. The mockumentary style, which was unique in 2009, felt played out by 2020. They relied heavily on celebrity cameos and big misunderstanding plots that felt like cartoons. It was still a comfortable watch like warm soup, but it lacked the spice of the early years. 11 seasons is a long time for any family to be interesting, but not as long as a group of nerds spent sitting on a couch in Pasadena. 9. The Big Bang Theory.
I was wondering if you could maybe teach me a little physics.
A little physics? There's no such thing, physics.
The Big Bang Theory started with a simple idea: 4 nerdy scientists and their beautiful neighbor. It was a show about geek culture before being a geek was cool. Sheldon Cooper was a breakout character with his specific rules and lack of social skills. For the first few years, it was a huge hit and very funny. But 12 seasons is a lifetime in TV years. As the show went on, the characters changed, and not always for the better. The writers decided to pair everyone up. Leonard got Penny, Howard got Bernadette, and even Sheldon got Amy. While character growth is good, it turned the show from a buddy comedy into a standard relationship sitcom. The science jokes took a backseat to marriage jokes. To put it mildly, Sheldon became a caricature of himself. His quirks, which used to be funny, became annoying and sometimes mean. The laugh track seemed to get louder while the jokes got weaker. Every episode felt the same. They would eat takeout, someone would make a nerdy reference, and Sheldon would say something rude. By the time the elevator was finally fixed in the finale, the show had run out of steam years ago. It was a ratings giant, but creatively, it was running on fumes. But from scientists, we go back to the groovy 70s, where a basement hangout lasted way too long. 10. That 70s Show.
Hey, what's the teeny writing on the bottom of the vase say?
What teeny writing?
That 70s Show perfectly captured the vibe of being a teenager in a boring town. The circle of friends smoking in the basement, the stern dad Red Foreman, and the groovy clothes. It launched the careers of huge stars like Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher. It was great until the kids started leaving the nest. The big issue came in the final season. The main character, Eric Foreman, played by Topher Grace, left the show. Imagine watching a show about a guy's life, and the guy is not there anymore. Then Ashton Kutcher, who played the hilarious Kelso, also left. To fill the void, the writers brought in a new character named Randy. Randy was meant to be a mix of Eric and Kelso, but fans hated him. He had no chemistry with the group. The thing nobody tells you is that the timeline of the show made no sense. The show ran for 8 seasons, but it was all supposed to take place between 1976 and 1979. They had multiple Christmas episodes in the same year. It was a mess. Without the core cast, the final season felt empty and sad. The finale brought everyone back for a brief moment, but the season leading up to it was a struggle to watch. It should have ended when the actors decided to move on. But speaking of moving on, our next show was hijacked by a character who was only supposed to be a one-time guest. 11. Family Matters.
Did I do that?
Family Matters started as a spin-off of Perfect Strangers. It was supposed to be a grounded show about a middle-class family in Chicago, the Winslows. It tackled real issues. But then a neighbor kid named Steve Urkel appeared. He was nerdy, wore suspenders, and had a high-pitched voice. The audience loved him. So the producers made a choice. They turned the show into The Steve Urkel Show. The actual family, the Winslows, became background characters in their own house. The plots went from normal family problems to pure science fiction. Urkel built a machine that turned him into the cool guy Stephen Urquelle. He built a robot of himself. He went to space. He shrank himself. It got even crazier. They even replaced the youngest daughter, Judy, and then she just disappeared completely without anyone mentioning it. By the later seasons, Carl Winslow was not a cop dealing with real life. He was a cartoon character dealing with Urkel's magical experiments. The show lost all its original heart in exchange for slapstick comedy. It ran for 9 seasons, but the last few were unrecognizable from the first. But if you think one character taking over is bad, wait until you see a show that used CGI to keep a dad in the picture. 12. The Goldbergs.
We're literally the coolest men alive.
Roger that.
The Goldbergs was a nostalgic trip to the 1980s based on the real childhood videos of creator Adam F. Goldberg. It was loud, colorful, and full of heart. The shouting match between Dad Murray and Mom Beverly was the core of the comedy. But like many shows on this list, it faced the problem of the kids growing up. When the real Adam went to college, the show lost its main framing device, but they kept going. The kids were adults, but they still acted like children living at home. The storylines became extremely repetitive. Beverly would smother her kids, they would get mad, and then they would hug it out every single week. But the real downfall came near the end. Jeff Garlin, who played the dad, left the show under bad circumstances. Instead of writing him out gracefully, the show used unused audio clips and strange CGI to insert him into scenes. It looked terrible and distracting. It was like watching a ghost. Eventually, they had his character pass away, but the show limped on for another season without him. It felt hollow. The joy of the 80s nostalgia had worn off, leaving behind a repetitive sitcom that had forgotten why people liked it in the first place. But from the 80s, let's go to the 90s and a family that seemed to hate each other. 13. Everybody Loves Raymond.
We're being honest. You said that's what you wanted.
I could have eaten a box of alphabets and crapped a better interview.
Everybody Loves Raymond was a masterclass in family tension. Ray Barone, his wife Deborah, and his overbearing parents living across the street. It was hilarious because it was relatable. Everyone has had an annoying in-law. For years, the bickering was sharp and funny. However, after 9 seasons, the constant fighting started to feel exhausting instead of funny. How many times can Marie insult Deborah's cooking? How many times can Ray act like a helpless child? The characters never learned or grew. They just kept having the same arguments. It became frustrating to watch Deborah stay in a marriage where she seemed so unhappy. What many overlooked is that the show ran out of real-life stories. The writers used to pull from their own lives, but eventually the well ran dry. The later episodes felt like they were just going through the motions. While the finale was emotional, the seasons leading up to it felt like we were trapped in that house with them, just waiting for the yelling to stop. It was a great show, but it definitely stayed at the party too long. But speaking of staying too long, our next show lost its biggest star and tried to replace him with a billionaire. 14. 2.5 Men.
You know anything about geometry?
Well, I know it's what you say when you turn into a tree. Get it? I'm a tree.
2.5 Men was a ratings juggernaut. It was simple: a bachelor, his uptight brother, and his nephew. Charlie Sheen played a version of himself, a rich jingle writer who loved the ladies. It was crude, but it was popular. Then the real-life drama happened. Charlie Sheen had a very public meltdown and was fired from the show. Instead of canceling it, the network hired Ashton Kutcher to play a billionaire named Walden who buys the house. It was a bizarre pivot. Suddenly, Alan Harper, the brother, was living with a stranger. The dynamic was completely gone. The half-man, the kid Angus T. Jones, also grew up and eventually left the show, calling it filth. So you had a show called 2.5 Men with no Charlie and no kid. To put it mildly, the show became a zombie. It ran for 4 more seasons with Ashton Kutcher. The jokes became even more reliant on shock value. Alan Harper went from a lovable loser to a parasitic leech who was impossible to root for. The finale was a strange meta-mess where they teased Charlie Sheen's return only to drop a piano on a look-alike. It was a giant middle finger to the audience. It proved that the brand name was more important than the quality of the show. But sometimes a show adds a new kid to try and save the ratings, and it ends up being a disaster. 15. Married with Children.
You are so honorable. Your wife must be really wonderful.
Well, she's a pip. But she's my pip.
Married with Children was the anti-Cosby show. The Bundys were rude, gross, and hated each other. It was a huge hit for the new Fox network. Al Bundy, the shoe salesman, was an icon of misery. But after many seasons, the formula started to get stale. The kids, Kelly and Bud, were growing up, and the writers needed a new source of chaos. Enter Seven. In Season 7, the writers introduced a new character, a little kid named Seven, who was abandoned by relatives. The Bundys took him in. It was a classic Cousin Oliver move, adding a cute kid to boost ratings. But the fans hated him. He didn't fit the vibe of the show at all. He was too cute for the nasty Bundy household. So what did they do? The thing nobody tells you is that they just stopped writing him into episodes. One day he was there, and the next day he was gone. His face later appeared on a milk carton in the background as a joke. It showed that the writers had no plan and were just throwing things at the wall. The show limped on for a few more years, but the energy was gone. It became a cartoon of itself, proving that even the most cynical show can get too old. But from low-class Chicago, let's go to high-class Seattle. 16. Frasier.
Easy now, you look great.
Don't BS me, I do not look great. I spent Monday on the bathroom floor. You can still see the tile marks on my face.
Frasier is one of the best spin-offs ever. It took a character from Cheers and gave him a whole new life. It was smart, sophisticated, and had amazing farce comedy. The tension between Frasier and his brother Niles, and Niles' secret love for the housekeeper Daphne, drove the show for years. But then, Niles and Daphne finally got together. It was what fans wanted, but it also popped the balloon of tension that made the show work. Once they were a happy couple, a huge source of comedy vanished. The later seasons struggled to find a new engine for the plot. Frasier's dating life became repetitive. He would meet a perfect woman, ruin it, and be alone again. Also, the character of Roz seemed to run out of storylines. The show added Daphne's screeching mother as a permanent character, which many fans found annoying. Season 11 felt like they were just marking time until the finale. It was still smarter than most shows on TV, but compared to its own early seasons, it felt slow and heavy. It is hard to keep a farce going for over a decade without it feeling forced. But speaking of the show that started it all, let's head to the bar where everybody knows your name. 17. Cheers.
Get my missus, I'm on my way.
Cheers. Yeah, just a sec. Is there an Udi Pantuso here?
That's you, Coach.
Speaking.
Cheers is legendary. It set the template for the ensemble comedy: Sam, Diane, Norm, Cliff, Carla. It was perfect. The will they, won't they romance between Sam and Diane was the hook. But then Shelley Long, who played Diane, left the show. Now, to be fair, Cheers did a great job reinventing itself by bringing in Kirstie Alley as Rebecca. It gave the show a second life. But 11 seasons is a long time to sit in a bar. By the end, the characters felt like they were stuck in a loop. Sam Malone was getting too old to be the playboy chasing young women. It started to look a bit sad. What many overlooked is that the bar itself started to feel depressing. These people spent every night of their lives drinking in a basement. The writers struggled to come up with new reasons for them to be there. Woody the bartender became too dumb to function. The finale was a massive event, but the last couple of seasons were definitely weaker than the prime years. It was time for closing time long before they actually turned off the lights. But from a bar, let's go to the Queen's living room that changed television. 18. All in the Family.
I won't go to my mother.
Why the hell not? You go to your father every chance you get.
I only go
to you when you go to me.
All in the Family was revolutionary. It tackled racism, war, and politics through the character of Archie Bunker. It was the #1 show for 5 years straight. But the problem with tackling current events is that times change. By the late 70s, the angry shouting of the 60s felt out of place. The show slowly transformed. Mike and Gloria, the daughter and son-in-law, left the show. That removed the conflict that fueled Archie's rants. Then, the show made a huge mistake. They continued it as Archie Bunker's Place. The setting moved from the house to a bar, but the biggest blow was when Gene Stapleton, who played the beloved wife Edith, decided to leave. The writers had Edith pass away from a stroke. Watching Archie Bunker without Edith was just sad. The comedy was gone, replaced by a melancholy mood. It dragged on for 4 more years in this new format, but it was a shadow of the giant it used to be. It shows that sometimes, when the main family breaks up, the show should break up too. And speaking of breaking up, our next show spun off from this one and also refused to end. 19. The Jeffersons.
Look, you don't understand.
I hate
Go
to
away.
trouble you.
The Jeffersons famously moved on up to the East Side. It was a great show about a successful black family, George and Louise Jefferson. George was hot-headed and hilarious. The show ran for a whopping 11 seasons. But like All in the Family, it ran out of things to say. The early seasons dealt with class and race in a funny way. The later seasons became more silly and sitcom-like. The character of George Jefferson, who was once sharp and biting, became a bit of a clown. The plots became repetitive. George does something scheming. Louise catches him. He apologizes. To put it mildly, the show was canceled without a proper finale. The cast did not even know they were done until after the last episode aired. It was a disrespectful end to a groundbreaking show, but it happened because the ratings had slowly slid down over years of mediocre episodes. It had simply been on the air too long, and the audience had moved on to newer things. But finally, we have a show that has been canceled twice and still won't stay dead. 20. Family Guy.
Jerome is an old boyfriend of mine.
What? Oh, sorry, I was out of it. Wait, are we being robbed?
Family Guy is the cockroach of television. It just will not die. It was canceled, then brought back because of DVD sales. For a while, it was the edgiest thing on TV. It pushed boundaries and made us laugh at things we shouldn't. But that was 20 years ago. Now Family Guy feels like it is written by an algorithm. The cutaway gags, those random jokes that have nothing to do with the plot, have become lazy. The characters have become cruel. Brian the dog used to be the voice of reason. Now he is just an arrogant jerk. Peter Griffin is dangerously stupid. The show relies on shock value, simply trying to offend people to get a reaction because the actual jokes aren't landing. What many overlooked is that the creator, Seth MacFarlane, openly said years ago that he wished the show had ended. He provides the voices, but he hasn't been the head writer for a long time. It feels like a show on autopilot. It is still on the air, churning out episodes that blend together, a perfect example of a zombie sitcom that is only alive because it makes money, not because it has anything left to say.